What is one constant between Hololive, Arknights, and Azur Lane? LAL has made official illustrations for all of them. If you like anime-adjacent media, it's possible you've seen LAL's beautiful and delicately drawn works before in promotional artworks. I love studying game art styles, and it's been a while since I've made a full-on art study. So today, why don't we study these illustrations and analyze why LAL is so good, and then attempt a LAL art style recreation to apply what we learned. With no process pictures to go off of, we can start our color picking to see the overall trend for LAL's colors. And at first glance, what I think of is unsaturated but rainbow. First, it's unsaturated because the skin colors stay around the upper left corner of the color picker, the clothes mostly following suit in the left gray area. We can color the skin in this order to keep a low saturation throughout, starting with a grayish color, adding more saturation, and then pivoting to white. The most saturation is around the termination between light and shadow and some blushes on the skin. But then, we zoom in on certain objects and you see this. How do you get that? I'm going to introduce you to a tool pro artists use all the time to quickly saturate otherwise unsaturated paintings. The Tone Curve tool. When you see rough edges in rainbow gradients or random color shifts, the rainbow gradient is a simple wave on the tone curve. This requires all of your shading to be on one layer, so you can reserve this step to the near end to add a little pop of color after your base colors are done. In a painting dominated by gray, that is what makes the colorful spots where LAL places saturated colors so good. Other than these rainbows, light and bright colors are rarely added to clothing and is placed sparsely in the background. Aside from these, the background is still mostly in the middle, not to contrast too much with the characters. And one last thing, the hair. Very delicate strands are drawn. In anime, hair is mostly drawn in bunches, but LAL makes the most of the illustration medium and finds a way to draw the strands not individually, but almost individually, with many of the strands catching the light. I think that's the charm point of these illustrations, where a lot of anime hair defies gravity. The way LAL drapes and curves hair around the body gives a subtle weight and realism. The low saturation, the semi-realistic hair, and thin line work all work together to create such an attractive semi-realistic anime illustration, not in the proportions, but in the way it's rendered. So, if we want to draw like LAL, we need to 1. Keep the skin in the upper left, 2. Keep most of the clothing near the left, 3. Add some brightness and middle of the palette in the background, 4. Draw the hair with strands and weight, and 5. Add rainbows and saturation back in with the tone curve. And with these notes in place, let's move on to making the art piece. Since I was focusing on the little details mainly concentrated on the upper body, so the face and hair, I opted to make a portrait this time. The character I'm drawing, Reed, is pretty reserved, so I drew her with one hand on her chest and the other reaching out a little bit towards you. I started this out with a regular sketch and drawing, adding rough colors and not paying attention to the palette yet because I wasn't sure which direction I was going to take it. Either the light was going to be from directly above her or behind her. But I put that decision away for later, since next was to work on the line art. LAL has thin, delicate lines, so I wanted to get it right on the first try. Slowly lining, and with the hair I used a smaller brush size. Clothing wasn't the focus of this painting, so I did it really roughly and paid for it later on when I need to liquefy and push everything around until it looks good. I don't know if it's just me, but aren't the portraits harder than full body paintings? With full body, I feel like the perspective and what you can put in the background can enhance, or should I say distract from mistakes you make in the actual small details of the character. While with portraits, since the main focus is on the face and body, if you mess up here, it's pretty obvious. I really didn't like this part of the painting because I didn't like how symmetrical this was. I tried to fix it with making the legs asymmetrical, but composition was only saved in the very end when I moved everything around. And for all of my efforts to avoid redrawing parts of it, I was really disappointed with how I initially drew the long hair. There was no draping, so I did go back in and redraw it. Moving on to the coloring. My mentality around that was, it's easier to add in saturation and make it look good then than to try and take the saturation away. So I started really gray and then layered more saturated pink blush colors on top. And at the line between light and shadows, I added a more saturated pink at the edge. The rest of the main colors and shadows were done with that in mind. While I worked from light to dark with the skin, for the hair I was a little more haphazard, first adding shadows, then highlights, and then I thought the hair wasn't bright enough, so I added a little yellow with an overlay layer. One thing that did go well was, because I was more rough with clothing, the folds in the dress was only highlighted by the light from above, so I was able to use edge control to try and add wrinkles and volume with that spotlight. And since the wrinkles were all converging around her waist, it had a nice effect of directing the eyes up to her face. Now that the base was all ready, I added all the layers for the character into a folder, and then duplicated and merged the folder into one layer so that I could play around with the curves. Since it's all in one layer, the curves will affect all the colors on the character, and I can add colors and the rainbow effect to different parts. I boosted the highlights and then focused on the darks, so the tights, at the lower end of the curve, adding more blue from the blue channel and greens from the green channel. Because this whole layer was affected, I ended up adding more saturation to the skin, and we don't want that. So I clipped it to the folder below and then erased the parts of the skin, so the original unsaturated colors of the skin could show through. And though the colors of the legs were good, most of the painting was still pretty plain, so I duplicated my layer and used tone curve again. But this time, instead of focusing on one part and only subtly adding color, I went all in with the blue, because we can mask this layer off and paint our rainbows in. Put it simply, the blue rainbow I made is all on one layer, but we hid it with the mask. And by painting on the mask layer, we're revealing parts we've hidden. So I revealed parts of that blue layer in the hair and the transitions between light and dark on the clothing. And lowered the opacity now that it was a little too bright. The hair was still too dark, so I made a hard light layer and an add layer to soft brush a little more yellow. And the eyes had too much contrast, so on the very lowest layer, the layer with the skin peeking through, I upped the values of the darks with the tone curve and used the mask to let the eyes show through. One add layer for the special effects of her heart shining through, and the composition was saved. I moved some stuff around, added her tail since she's a dragon girl, and used more add layers in the background to add the flames. And the rough brush made the fire look nice and rough. Next, the little details, smoothing out some lines. Because the big picture colors were all done with the canvas zoomed out, I wasn't able to work on the little things, so I fixed any gaps, overflows, any points where the lines overlapped or weren't connecting. For the hair in particular, when you zoom in, the strands are all blended together, so I tried to add more strands to make sure there was some variety in colors, especially in the strands near the shoulders. I added the neck pattern on her shirt and even more details. After adding more shine to the eyes, the blush needed to be more deep, so I used an overlay layer. Roughly did the lilies in her hair, and finally the cuff. The blue was supposed to glow, so I used an add layer. And done! Looking at the final, I think I did well with the colors, not too saturated, but just in the right places. I did regret not doing a full body and full background, but I did learn a lot about lining and coloring the hair with so many little tiny strands. I don't think I've ever done such detailed hair before, but I think I'll do it more in the future. I really like it. Portraits are very, very difficult, but I definitely learned a lot from this study, and I hope you learned something interesting too. Thanks for watching. See ya!